Okay. Okay. Welcome everybody to tonight's school committee meeting. We're going to open with the Pledge of Allegiance. We'll have the school committee as a whole lead. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So we have minutes from March 7th. So we have consent agenda, minutes from March 7th, and oath to bills and payroll. Is there?
Make a motion to accept the oath and bills, oath to bills and payroll as read.
Second.
Any discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Motion passes. We have two pieces of business on the agenda tonight. One will be doing the appointment for the Choctaw Valley Technical High School, our alternate representative, which is a joint appointment between the Board of Selectmen, the town moderator, and the school committee. Is Carl here?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, hi, Carl. So you're the only applicant, but maybe before we reappoint you, if you could maybe just say a couple words about what role you've been playing at the.
Well, I'm the alternate school committee person. I work with Charlie Ellis, who's the school committee person, and he happens to be the chairman of the Neshoba School Committee right now, which is probably fortunate for Littleton, because he would have a little more influence. They rotate it, so every town gets their chance. So basically my responsibility there is to back up Charlie. If he's not there, it gives me, being the alternate, gives me the rights to sit at the table and vote. When he's there, I can't. I can participate in any committees that the school committee has. So the only thing that I can't do is vote. So basically, that's it in a nutshell. I just try to keep my finger on it.
Yeah. Are you in any of the subcommittees?
Currently, no. But I'm probably going to be volunteering for one because they're a little bit short-staffed.
Does anybody of our two boards and town moderator have any questions for Carl?
Happy to have back.
Great. With that, I'll call for a vote to reappoint Carl as our alternate representative to the Neshoba Tech. All in favor?
I believe it has to be a roll call.
Does a roll call vote? Okay. Moderator?
Aye.
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 And aye. So you can record all the ayes. Unanimously passes. Congratulations on your reappointment.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
We were trying to stretch this out till 7:10. So that we'd start the budget hearing at the appropriate time. Yeah, so we just need to, just for formality, we need to just pause for a couple of minutes here to not start the hearing early. No, I don't see a large public audience here, but we'll be respectful in case they're late. With that, unfortunately, there's no other business that we need to cover here that we could slip in. Jen, you didn't schedule a whole batch of policies
I did not this
tonight.
time.
There, so
We have hold music.
you can sing. tack any other business on, because we learned that several years ago, not to have other business on the agenda for the public hearing. So by the police department clock, we're at 7:10 now. So Kelly, would you like to lead the budget presentation for us?
Sounds good.
Good evening, everybody. I'm happy we're at this point in the process in our budget deliberations. I'm happy to report this evening that we're presenting a draft FY20 budget that allows us to continue to actualize our vision and our strategic plan, and most importantly, allows us to meet the needs of our current students. So it certainly fits everything that I was looking for as a superintendent in our budget. The next slide, we have our mission statement, which is something that should be near and dear to us. We need to be accomplishing our mission every single year. That's the basis of our existence, and as I just mentioned, this budget allows us to do that. Our district for a number of years has espoused 4 values: respect, responsibility, integrity, and accountability. Those themes are interwoven through our schools and our district. Our budget process timeline, excuse me, we begin the process in October, and by the time May rolls around, we've had our budget hearing, which we're having this evening. And through this process, we start with identifying budget priorities. We identify priorities based on student needs and our strategic plan. That really drives our budgeting process. If you recall in October, excuse me, what we're doing at that time of year, we're just starting to implement the current year's budget. We're also many times closing out the previous year's budget. So at that stage of the process, it really truly is a prediction. And as the process continues through to March, our numbers become finite or finer, more or less, but we're always making adjustments along the way as a result of still implementing the previous year's budget. There are always unanticipated expenditures that you're always aware of. This year was a situation in which our out-of-district costs went up much higher than we had anticipated. Luckily, we had enough school choice funds to help cover it for the current year. Excuse me, moving into next year, we were able to secure enough funds in the appropriated budget for us to take care of those costs. Next slide, thank you. Our priorities for 2019-2020 continue to meet the learning needs of all students. Continue assessment of district programming to ensure that students are attaining the skill sets necessary to be college and career ready. Continue emphasis on SEL learning and student wellness. It's been a large focus of ours throughout the past 4 years. We certainly upped our game, so to speak, this year with 2 resources that we're going to be using not only this year but next year as well. Maintain current student-teacher ratios. We've been very successful at doing that. We always have students that move in during the year, and it is a bit of an unpredictable game, but for the most part, we've been pretty accurate in our predictions. We continue to focus on instructional practices that integrate social and emotional skills, support inclusion and co-teaching models, advance growth mindset strategies, develop effective functioning, executive functioning skills, reflect sheltered English immersion, SEI. Recall a few years ago the state made it mandatory that teachers that have SCI students in their classroom or English language learners in their classroom have to have a course prior to recertification. Other administrators, such as myself, Steve Mark is the business manager, needs to take an SEI course for 15 PDPs prior to recertification as well. So they put a large focus, or an increased focus, on making sure our teachers and administrators have a good understanding of how to teach students that have another language within our schools and classrooms. We continue to foster a professional learning culture that promotes growth and innovation. Collaborate with cross-district PD last few years with Harvard Public Schools, Air Shirley School District. This year we're hoping to be able to have a pre-K through 12 in-service day. The last year, or this year, we had a 6 to 12, and prior to that, it was just a high school PD day. So we're excited that we can collaborate with other districts. The learning opportunities for our staff in these settings is just great to see. It's not only what's presented during the day, but it's the connections that last, and as a result of that, the sharing of materials back and forth, which makes this day very powerful. We also will be implementing the updated Massachusetts History and Social Sciences curriculum frameworks that some of you, I'm sure, have heard a lot about. We provided professional development to support actualization of Vision 2020. Social and emotional learning, again, as I mentioned, will be continuing to be a focus next year. We're also increasing our focus on writing across the curriculum. We're looking for more consistency in the methodologies that we use in our classrooms in terms of writing. Writing is an essential skill, and we need to make sure that we give our students what they need in order to succeed as they continue through our school district and beyond. We are still in conversations with Neshoba Valley Technical High School. We're hoping, excuse me, to somehow strike a partnership where some of our students can go take some of their courses in their junior and senior year. We will reciprocate by having some of their students come into our high school and access world language classes. So we've had some good conversations, but today we don't have an agreement, but we're hoping to strike one up prior to next year. Our technology initiatives implement site-based technology plans, which we've been doing for a number of years, using digital tools to enhance curriculum lessons, continue to actualize computer-based assessments, including Next Generation MCAS, and our LHS 1-in-1 program will be complete next year with all students in grades 9 through 12 having a Chromebook to use throughout their classes in the year. We've also worked very hard with Middlesex College to develop dual enrollment courses. We had 3 that were offered. We're hoping to eventually have a dual enrollment course offered in every subject discipline in our high school. We're also currently talking with them and hoping to somehow find a way to bring an instructor to our high school that meets DESE requirements so that we can dive into computing science. Right now, a number of our students are taking computing science courses through VHS. It's working fine, but I would really like to have an instructor in front of them if possible. Our next slide takes a look at our original budget proposal. Our increase at that time was $1,403,922. We were able to, with that number, take care of contractual and non-contractual salary obligations, our increased out-of-district tuition costs, move the $150,000 that we've used to reduce full-day kindergarten tuition into the appropriated budget, and also absorb the increase in out-of-district student transportation. And we also had a new HVAC contract that required extra funds. You'll notice in that number we were not able to address any of our staffing that we identified in terms of wanting to increase. When we met with FinCom and the Board of Selectmen February 25th, we, as a town, had a deficit of $205,873, and that gap needed to be closed. Those of you that have been around for a while realize that that's not a large gap. We've had gaps over $600,000–700,000 at that stage of the process. So we felt that this was something that definitely could be closed. Excuse me. As a result, we were asked to take a look at our budget and find out ways to help close that $205,000 gap. We came up with a proposed solution of not filling two vacant ed assistant positions in our district, and we do have some anticipated retirement savings from people that have indicated that they are retiring. We did not have that information when we first started the budget process, so it was nice to have it prior to having to look at ways to downsize our budget. I do want to point out at this point in time that we are the only department in the town that downsized our budget. But at the same time, we have an increase in our total budget that's been higher than previous years to accommodate those increased out-of-district costs. With our reduction and continued deliberation with the town, we've agreed on a proposed budget increase of $1,311,922. That will take care of our contractual steps and lane increases, out-of-district tuition, moving the $150,000 from our kindergarten reduction into our appropriated budget, student transportation increase, and also the HVAC increase in operational costs. So we're very pleased that we were able to do that. For a while there, we weren't sure how successful we were going to be at securing that kind of increase. As I mentioned earlier, we had identified areas for increased staffing and also our third phase of tuition-free kindergarten, which would reduce our tuition further, and that would require a $75,000 injection. That is not included in the appropriated budget, but as per our last discussion, we had talked about taking that $75,000 out of school choice revenue. So that's something that we need to discuss at the end of the presentation before moving forward and before you entertain a motion to accept the approved budget. We were really looking forward to adding an assistant principal to Russell Street School. That would complete our journey in making sure that every school had an assistant principal. We just didn't feel that we could entertain any of these positions in FY20 with the amount of money that we are asking for to support our budget. Mental health counselor and HR administrator part-time. We're getting more and more work and expectations dropped down to us from HR from the state level, and it's getting harder and harder to keep up with the paperwork. That's a typical process that you see happen in public organizations. The support organizations for health benefits, pensions, etc., always come up with new and improved ways to do business, and most of the time that means that we have to do more. So it's just starting to catch up for us. We also have the additional school resource officer that is down there as well, and as I've already stated, we really didn't have time to even discuss these positions with FinCom and Board of Selectmen as a result of trying to secure enough funding to take care of everything else that I've previously discussed with you. If, however, we find that there's extra money that comes into the town via Chapter 70 or receipts of some nature, we would expect to have a conversation at the table and have an opportunity to talk about other areas specific to the positions that we've mentioned that we would like to add into the budget. So if the town does receive more money, we're certainly expecting to have those conversations and advocate for those positions at that time. If you follow Chapter 70 for a number of years, we usually flat fund Chapter 70, and most often we get around $27,000, $28,000 every year for Chapter 70, which is a real small amount considering the budget increases required to sustain the current configuration of our organization. But it's better than nothing, and we'll see what happens as we approach September and see if we actually receive any money. Our school choice account, our projected end balance in FY19 is $1,002,476. Our projected receipts for 2020, $400,000. Annual salary offset, we've been doing this for many, many years, is $250,000. So our projected FY 2020 available funds would be $1,152,476. At our last meeting, we had talked about do we need to suggest a percentage of balance of our school choice account as we move forward, and we were contemplating around 5%. So we see a sliding scale in front of you at the bottom of this slide. And again, if we didn't use any other money but the $250,000, we'd have $1,152,476 available. This budget, however, does include an additional $75,000 taken out of school choice, so that we're able to continue on with our full-day kindergarten tuition reduction plan. So if you look across that line, that would leave us with a balance of 5.11%, providing there are no other anticipated expenses that occur during FY20. There always are, but I just want to be clear that we would strive to keep that balance. If you have any questions as I'm going through the slides, please don't hesitate to interrupt. We've already talked about our kindergarten phase-in. This just explains it in a little more detail. If we put that $75,000 in the FY20 budget via school choice, our tuition for next year for full-day kindergarten would be $1,750. So we are getting down there, and we're getting closer. As your superintendent, I'm pleased that we're entertaining continuing on with this. As I said 2 years ago, if we're going to jump into this venture, we need to be committed to do it and finish it. And, as my philosophy is, if you're going to agree to do something as a group, unless something really drastic happens where you can't do it anymore, you should finish the job that you set out to do. So I'm hoping that you feel the same way as we entertain a vote this evening. Next slide, our FY 2020 proposed budget broken apart into salaries and expenses. You can see a comparison between our FY 19 appropriated budget and our FY 20 proposed appropriated budget. Salaries went up 4.6%, very similar to the salary increase in our FY 19 budget, within 0.2%. Remember, $150,000 of that $673,000 is a result of moving the $150,000 from school choice back into salaries.
250.
No, we're talking about kindergarten.
Oh.
So it's $150,000. And so $150,000 of that would be kindergarten salaries. So we actually did really well on our salary increases this year with our contractual and other employees. Expenses went up 12.5%. That's pretty well double to what we had last year. The majority of that increase, obviously, is out-of-district tuition costs. Our total budget, appropriated budget increase is 6.6%. Last year, FY19, it was 4.8%. So we're up a little higher than we were in the previous year for understandable reasons. Any questions on that slide before I move on? This slide is, I call it a little convoluted, looking at our proposed cost center summary. As you recall, we have 8 cost centers that we take a look at. That way we're assured of talking about the same numbers within categories, whoever we talk to. What we've done on this slide is taken a look at appropriated revolving funds. So now I'm talking about a pool of funds. I'm not talking about school choice anymore. I'm talking about all of our revolving funds. If you look at that page, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but I'm just going to go to the bottom. We've also put Taggers Den in there, which is not a cost center. but our appropriated budget in FY19 was $19,790,270. Our revolving fund expenditures, $3,587,560, for a total funding plan of $23,377,830. We look at our proposed budget for FY20, our appropriated amount, $21,102,192. Revolving fund contribution, $3,332,074, for a total funding plan of $24,434,266. Please remember that that includes the $75,000 for the third phase of the kindergarten reduction. The next slide is even a little more convoluted. It takes a look at percents and dollar changes in appropriated and revolving budgets. Really, what I want to do in this slide is just go down to the school administrative line. It went up 14.2%. The reason for that is last year we hired an assistant principal at Shaker Lane School out of school choice funds. So those funds were now moved over to the appropriated budget in the appropriate line. That money actually, this is really hard to follow. I'm trying to keep it as simple as I can. The original money is part of that $350,000 reduction in the regular education line. So it was put in there last year out of revolving funds, and then it was pulled out into the appropriated budget this year. And that's the only two items I wanted to highlight on that page. If you have questions, please ask. Our circle graphs for FY 2020 funding plan for our appropriation. You can see our cost centers and see how much of the pie, so to speak, that it takes. Interesting when you compare regular education to special education. Those are the two biggest slices of our pie in our appropriated budget. Our next slide takes a look at spending that actually touches the classroom and refers to other spending as other expenses. In our appropriated budget, 70% of the money that we fund in the proposed budget will be directly related to classroom, and 30% would be other expenses. I think that's an important chart to look at every year to make sure that that we're doing everything we can to put as much money into our classrooms as possible that directly impacts student learning. Our next slide is very similar with the 8 cost centers, but it's a total funding plan, so it also includes revolving funds. You can see there's not much difference in terms of what the biggest slices of the pie are, which would be expected. And if we go to the next slide, when we take a look at costs that touch our classrooms as opposed to other expenses, there was a 1% drop. 69% of our funds will go to the classrooms more correctly, 31% other expenses. You have to remember when we pull in the revolving funds, we're collecting fees for busing and a variety of other things, athletic programs, so that naturally would drive that percentage down. Happy that it only drives, or pleased more correctly, that it only drives it down 1%. Total school spending history from 2014 to our proposed 2020 budget. This is, I think, a very interesting slide. The blue bar stands for town appropriation, the orange revolving funds, and the lime green, or whatever kind of green you'd like to call it, total spending. And you can see it's kind of interesting. Our revolving funds spending, it does vary a bit, but it's the most consistent indicator on that table. And when you look at the other two bars, you see a gradual increase in spending. For somebody that's been in this business a number of years, when I was a regional superintendent, my philosophical belief was we do everything possible to prevent spikes in our budgets from year to year. If you can have a gradual increase and justify those increases from year to year, it's a much better way to go, and it's more palatable to your communities as well. Nothing worse than all of a sudden having a spike of 25%. and then going down the next year. It just creates a lot of concern because obviously tax levels go up at an infrequent rate rather than a steady rate or a minimal rate if possible. On that note, if you look at how education is funded in this state, and pretty well every state within our nation, more and more funds are coming from local taxation, and less funds are coming from state revenue. So what that really says, in a nutshell, is communities that are able to secure larger corporate tax bases are the ones that will do better or fare better in the long run if there are no changes in the funding process within this state or other states, which is really interesting when you look at it that way. You also have to remember communities that have a significant tax base by nature receive less state funding. We're about a 23% receiver. If you look at cities like Worcester, Leominster, they would most likely be up in the 80s or even mid-80s. I don't have the exact figure, but that's where a lot of Chapter 70 goes, is to the communities that are struggling more financially, which makes sense. Every state is trying to create an equitable education system so all students have equal opportunities to succeed. Per pupil expenditures, this is a very interesting slide. For years and years, this district I don't know if this district was ever above the average state per pupil cost. Certainly during my time here, we've been below. And you can see we're making slow gains. But even if I look at the 2017 numbers, which is the last year the state has reported this, they're usually a few years behind. If I take a look at that variance between the state per pupil costs and, our district per pupil costs, and multiply that by the 2017 district enrollment, we'd have a variance of $1.4 million. So even if we had a piece of that, that would make a tremendous difference in our district. So just something to think about as we continue to advocate for funding for our district in future years. I mean, there's no magic number for this, but when you're that amount of money below, it would say to me, as somebody that's been in the financial industry and education many years, that there is a bit of discrepancy here. I'm not saying we should be at state average, but there must be some number in between that would be a little more equitable for us as a school district. And you can have debates, philosophical debates on this for months at a time in terms of what comprises the average per student cost. It doesn't matter what way you look at it, in my opinion. They're comparing the same thing. And I think there is somewhat of an inequity as we see it, when we compare ourselves to the average per pupil cost in the state. So we're efficient. That's quite obvious. Questions on that slide? School choice. In FY18, or school year 18-19, more correctly, you'll recall me talking about this year, our seniors, we have 11 school choice students exiting. When we were preparing the slides for tonight's presentation, I had put 5 potential kindergarten school choice students. I'm not sure whether we're going to be able to hold true to that. We have 116 potential students registered to date without transition. We're projecting anywhere from 10 to 13 students in transition. So we're up in the 125, 127. So at best, I could probably, unless we're overestimating, take in 2 school choice students. So I have 11. We have 11 going out, excuse me, and 2 coming back in. So that's going to be a financial loss right off the start in terms of our school choice funds. We've talked about this for many, many years, that as our grades become a little more stabilized with students, we're not going to be able to be as reliant on taking school choice students into our district. I'm hoping we can take 3 students in grade 1. We can certainly fit them in grade 1 next year. But the question will be, will we have enough applicants to fill 3 seats in grade 1? I think we might, because it's still very early. So, we'll see what happens. We'll monitor this, and prior to us presenting a school choice plan to you, we'll come up with some final numbers that we'll recommend. But I really feel strongly at this point in time that we're not going to be able to match the school choice seats that we had in the current school year. So there will be a decrease in revenue from school choice next year. This is a very busy slide, to say the least. And it just breaks it apart into resident enrollment, school choice enrollment, and it also does it by school. I really like the next slide. It's just easier to read for school by school enrollment. But if you look at the bottom here, the bottom graph, you can see in 2013-14, our total student population was 1,513 students. If you go to our 2018-19 total population, we're at 1658. So, we've had somewhat of an increase over that time span. But if you backtrack 3 or 4 years, if you look at 17-18, we were at 1670, and this current year we're at 1658. So it definitely has slowed down. And that's something that our chairman has pointed out many times to us when we've been talking about enrollment trends in our district. Student by student enrollments, nice easy bar graph to read. You can see our enrollments for each school. Shaker Lane's at the bottom, then Russell Street Middle School, and high school's at the top. If we go from top to bottom, our high school was 441 in 2013-14. And it's at 454 now. We jumped up to 471 in the 16-17 year. And you see some fluctuations from year to year. If we look at the middle school, we had 376 in 2013-14, and we're at 364 now, so we're actually down a bit. Russell Street, 352 students in 13-14, and we're at 399 this year. Shaker Lane, 418 in 13-14, and we're at 441 this year. Please bear in mind this is October 1st enrollments, and we do have enrollment fluctuations throughout the year. Budget concerns. I've already hit on most of these. Level funding of local aid dollars, increase in out-of-district placements and tuition. But when we really look at that from 2013 to now, we had a spike in 2013, but our costs have been typically under $200,000 from that point until this year. So we've done really well. And it would be foolish to think that we're not going to get a spike in out-of-district costs every now and again with the trends that we're seeing in the state. That's a pattern that we're noticing. We've noticed for years, and we've been fortunate that we haven't had another spike until the FY20 year. New development and housing growth is something we're going to have to continue to watch. There's a number of developments that are taking off in town. We'll see if that has a pronounced effect or not. If we do have more students, we'll have to take a look at classroom space, transportation costs, and obviously sped costs. Our continuing reliance on revolving funds, FY20 budget, or proposed budget, I feel does a good job of starting to decrease that reliance, so it's a move in the right direction. Contractual and non-contractual salaries, keeping pace with market trends, it's something we've been watching. We are competing a little better, but we're still not where we need to be. There are a lot of factors you have to consider in that. If you go to a bigger district, you can secure a larger salary, but what are your responsibilities and what's your quality of life like? So it has to balance. But even taking that into account, I think we really need to watch that as we move forward. Increased costs associated with extracurricular and co-curricular programming. The more successful we are with that programming, the more costly it is. So it's a celebration, but at the same time, it costs more of an injection of money to keep the programs going. Town appropriation support for structural increases. and as I've already mentioned, the ability to maintain school choice seats and associated revenue. Accomplishments, I'll just emphasize a few on each page. All of our accomplishments are always put under this various standards of our strategic plan. So our first standard, curriculum, instruction, and assessment. This is pre-K to 5. We are currently piloting Foundations. That's the phonics program in 2 kindergarten classrooms. Our intention is to move into grade 1 next year and then grade 2. As a superintendent, I feel very strongly that we need a consistent phonics program, K through 2. And we've talked about it for years, but when we looked at our MCAS results 2 years ago, there was a trigger for us to do a deep dive into what was happening in ELA and math, K through 5. And through that exploration, that was one of the recommendations that we came up with. It was a phonics program. The other one was a writing program. The third one was to use our math resources with fidelity. And that's something that we've been monitoring ever since we've had those conversations. We continue to use Second Step as our research-based SEL program, K through 8. Russell Street has dipped their toe into the water this year. As you recall, they've been using Responsive Classroom for years. It's a great program, but we needed to add more to the plate. And as a result, we're implementing Second Step in grades 3 to 5 as well. We've made a concerted effort around SEL instruction with the philosophy every teacher should be using SEL strategies within all of their classrooms. And in order to be successful with SEL competency acquisition with our students, our staff need to have core competencies in all of those areas as well. So we will continue to spend time to ensure that our teachers have the training and acquire the skill sets necessary to serve as models, and also use strategies within their classrooms that help our students move forward with SEL skill development. Let's see here. We've also incorporated a 6-week K-2 social thinking curriculum, and we now have a K-5 standards-based report card, which is nice, and they are tied into Aspen, which is very pleasing as well to me as a superintendent. I think the principals are happy that they were finally able to get to that point in time as well. Professional development, again, SEL and teaching strategies have been a major focus. Dreambox math, guided math. We still continue to spend time on K-5 curriculum alignment. And we've had 2 sessions this year. We brought an expert in on trauma-informed instruction. That's something that we really need to move forward on. Trauma can occur in many different forms, and we're finding that as a district, we certainly have students that have experienced trauma, and the teaching strategies that are used are not dissimilar to some of the strategies that we're using, but some of them are more refined. So we want to make sure that our staff is up to speed on what those strategies are. Culture climate. We've, as you all know, have reassessed our ALICE protocols and safety protocols, and we're doing 2 training and drills a year now. We have partnerships with high school, partnerships with the Council on Aging. It's really nice to see our seniors in our schools and reading to our kids and interacting with our students. It's certainly a nice intergenerational project. Community communication, we redesigned our school and district website. It's, I think, a much better fit for our district. And what I'm really happy about is one of the very few school districts that had talent inside to be able to do it. So we virtually did it at no cost. If you've ever created a website and had somebody come in, you're looking at $25,000 to $30,000 plus maintenance fees from year to year. So I feel I need to tout that because that could have been an added expense, not only an initial expense, but a recurring expense from year to year. We continue to develop and actualize service learning projects. And Shaker Lane has partnered with the Safe Routes to School initiative as well. which I'm very pleased to see as well. Technology, for Shaker Lane, we opened Shakey's Imagitorium and added a K-5 STEM and STEAM integration specialist. And our STEM integration specialist is doing an incredible job. Some of the projects our kids are involved in are just fascinating. She's added so much excitement to STEM and STEAM. And we've also added Google Expeditions to all of our schools, including K-2. Our kindergarten classes have been on a few expeditions themselves, which is really exciting to witness. And we've added another 3D printer. Those printers are working hard all the time. I just found out tonight on my way down here that Littleton Electric Light and Water has also sponsored us for another 3D printer in our lab. So they're about $3,500. So special thanks to them for coming to the plate, so to speak, and helping us move forward in that area. MCAS exams, as you all know, are online now, so it's nice to know that we have the infrastructure that can handle online testing and also sufficient computers that we can use to make sure that our students comply with state regulations, and that's worked really well. Middle school, implementation of the new math textbooks, 2018. When we buy textbooks, there is an online component, but we're not at the spot in time within the nation to just be able to buy online resources for our core subjects. They want you to buy the textbooks, and then they give you access to online materials. We've implemented programs for struggling learners, executive functioning workshops, math lab, literacy lab, and the ASC. We also have programs for advanced learners that we've been running in the middle school for a number of years. We continue to have interdisciplinary projects at the middle school. I'd like to see that increase through time. And they modified the daily schedule this year to include a rotation in the morning and afternoon. What I'm hoping to see at both the high school and middle school is a serious consideration of a rotating schedule that decreases the number of classes that students take a day. As I've said before, and we'll be giving a presentation on this first meeting in April, our students are experiencing increased levels of academic stress in the middle school and high school, something that we've taken very seriously, and I've asked the administration of both schools to present the results to the staff, listen to their story, and then come up with solution-oriented action statements as to how we're going to do whatever we can to reduce academic stress. A lot of the stress from the interviews I attended with students stems from homework expectations and multiple exams on the same day. So if we could just coordinate that through some technology software, I think our students would feel a lot better about what they were doing every day. One thing that stood out to me in the interviews that I attended, the focus group interviews, is a number of students said to me that we feel that we don't have any flexibility in our lives, that our lives are always structured. We have no time to do other things, maybe actually just sit and do nothing. And our high school students, some of them said that their parents have started to have them do homework at the kitchen table, not because they're using a computer in their room and accessing other sites. It's because they don't see them anymore, because they're in their room doing homework. So I think we really need to evaluate the purpose of homework within our district. It's common sense to anybody. You don't have to be an educator, that if you're not allowing your students to turn off what they're doing, they're going to be tired, and they're not going to learn as much, and they're not going to retain as much. So as a superintendent, I can assure you that I'm expecting some changes as we move forward. And of course there will be homework, but I think we have to really reassess what homework is and make sure that it's really getting what we want out of it for our students, and that is increased learning opportunities. Professional development, very similar to what I've talked about in elementary. Culture, community, culture, climate, community communication, technology. Very, very similar. Our makerspace is called the C-Lab. The middle school, we have different names at each school. Excuse me, Google Expeditions are really taking off at the middle school. Our high school, I've already talked about some of these things, our partnership with Middlesex Community College. I think it's very powerful that our staff can get dual certified so that they can teach an honors course and offer our students an honors credit and also a college credit at the same time. I think that's a fantastic arrangement. We just need to encourage more of our staff to do that as we move forward. A few years ago, we partnered with DCU Bank and integrated the EverFi financial literacy program into our economics and statistics courses. We've been talking about that for a few years. This is a great program, and it's doing what we need it to do. So, special thanks to DCU for taking the time to develop a curriculum. We've moved more in the last couple of years to college essay conference process with our English department, where English teachers will sit down with our students as they're writing college essays and help them through it. And so they have another set of eyes on their work, and as a result, our students are producing a better product. That was a great addition to what we're doing. And we're doing a lot of great things in our schools, as you can see. Professional development, very similar to what I've talked about. We continue with CPR and AED training provided by the Littleton Fire Department. We're very appreciative of that. I feel very strongly about this, that every student prior to graduation should be certified in both those areas. We have an opportunity. We haven't been able to arrange it with the fire department in terms of time yet to offer tourniquet training. And there is another pronunciation for that word, but we'll stick with tourniquet tonight. And it's going to be a bit of a challenge because they can't just add it into the CPR and AED training. It's going to require additional hours, and we have to try to fit it in and still cover the standards in those courses. So I'd like to see that offered as well. Climate culture, very similar. I am so thrilled and continue to be pleased about our Best Buddy Club at our middle school and high school. Our kids do such a fantastic job. We should be very proud of that organization. And in the high school, we've added 2 unified athletic teams, one in track and field and one in basketball this year. And we were the high school was designated as a unified champion school current year. So very pleased with those accomplishments. Community communication, very similar. We are, however, continuing to expand our student internship programs and work study programs with businesses in our community and beyond. For the past 3 years, we've been actually having our students 1 day a week offer to help members of the Council on Aging come in and take care of any technology issues that they're having. And we get a few people every week, so it's kind of nice to help them along so they develop more confidence using technology. Our Chromebook program will be complete as of the FY20 school year with all of our students having Chromebooks, so we're super excited about that. Virtual high school has served us well and continues to serve us well as we offer broader-based programming at the high school level. And that brings me to our last slide. That wasn't bad timing. And special thanks to our community, our students, our staff, our parents, our residents. Without their support, our school district would look very different. And they've been very supportive of our school district for many, many years. We are very appreciative of that. We also have nonprofit organizations in our community, for-profit organizations that have supported our school for many, many years, or schools more correctly, and they provide those little extras that we could never afford, and it makes a tremendous difference in the lives of our students. And we also benefit from our other town departments, and all of us working together allow us to provide a unique and personalized education for every student within our schools. So Thanks to our community and everybody on this list and beyond. Questions?
Thank you, Kelly, for doing the presentation tonight. Jen, any questions, comments, concerns?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say it again, that there has been a lot of work this year and every year, but I feel like there was a lot more discussed back and forth with the various departments in town this year, so I really do appreciate everything that's gone into this. It's been.
I think just by the presentation, we see that we always seem to make it work, and we're being, not only making it work, we're being very successful with what we have. So kudos to you, Kelly, and everyone who put their hard work into getting the budget to once again level out.
Thank you. Well, Budget Subcommittee deserves a lot of credit as well.
Erica?
I just had one question about the school choice account. So when we're looking at the projected number for 2020 receipts, the 400,000.
Which slide are you on?
12.
There we go.
Is that based on the numbers that you put forward in slide 23, or the numbers that you discussed as might be the actual numbers?
That's what we're hoping to take in FY20.
So that's based on the
The
5 kindergarten and 5 first grade?
No, it would be 2 kindergarten and 3 first grade.
So it's based on what you think it is,
Right.
not what
Right.
was here?
Right. But
Okay.
Erica, what we're going to do this year is take a look at, Steve, if you go to the enrollment slide there. Well, actually, if you go back to that one, that would be fine. When you look at our class sizes in FY20, there are a number of areas where we can take a look at, what would the ideal class size be that we have a staffing configuration for, and 125 comes to mind. What we're going to do this year, and the Budget Subcommittee has talked about this, is we're going to move some of those classes up to that, if we can, to that 125 range. There are no guarantees that we're going to have students apply for those seats, but they may. So that hopefully will give us a little more stability. It may or may not. I mean, we'll see what happens. So we're going to have to try to do something to keep this funding coming in. But it's kind of a delicate balance, because our schools don't have a lot of room left in them. So to add another classroom is an easy thing to do without adding a portable, which can be challenging. And we don't want to overcrowd classrooms so that our student-teacher ratio goes up. So we're trying to make sure that we remain successful in terms of what we've been doing in the past. But it is going to be harder to maintain that income from school choice as we move forward.
Last year, we projected 450,000 in school choice, right? So that we're already just projecting.
Right, so we're projecting less.
Okay.
So, yeah, good point, Darryl.
The only other thing, more just a statement. We, in the budget process, we spend a lot of time talking about how much money goes into SPED, and I think that's important to highlight because it's a number we can't control, and it's important that the town knows that that's, an increased area and an area that we can't control. And it's also an area that we're not getting adequate funding from the state for. So I think it's important that we highlight it, but I also think it's just important to remind people that regardless of what that number is, that is an essential number to educate kids in Littleton. And
that's what we need to do.
And that's what we need to do.
Yes, I mean, that's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, the budget is what it is. We're not any different than any other district, and it's our job, it's our obligation to make sure that every single child in this community gets the education that they need to be successful. And that is a core mandate.
Right. And part of and back of the language we asked the Board of Selectmen to change in their budget call is we have, use the term required services. We can't live on something that says it's got to be based on last year's budget because our situations change, and we can't be in a position where we're trading off because some of those expenses, we pay them whether it's budgeted or not, and we can't be pulling from other critical areas to cover it and making sure the town sees that, but also the key was getting the town budgeting process to recognize that we have a different expense model that has to be accounted for with it. It still gives us challenges in terms of these other items that we feel educationally we need to do, and we then have to prioritize those initiatives. But I think that part of the process has improved dramatically the last several years.
It has. It really has.
For it. I don't have any additional questions on the budget. You know, we've obviously been kept abreast of it over here, and many of us have attended multiple Board of Selectmen and Finance Committee meetings where the budgets of both the town budget and the school budget's been discussed. So I'd like to thank you, Mike in his absence, and Matt from the Budget Subcommittee in terms of putting this presentation together tonight for us, because I think it provided us a good insight. We don't have a lot of additional debate because I think we're all up to speed pretty much on it. Let me just technically close the public hearing here, and we'll hit the piece here of requesting any citizen input on the budget. But there's no audience here tonight, so so it's not that we're not taking public input. It's just that I think, you know, I'm interpreting that we've done a good job at projecting out what the budget situation was and conveying the information to the public. And if there's no additional discussion on the budget, Matt, do you have a motion to?
Move to approve the school budget for the FY 2020 with a town appropriation of $21,102,192 with the use of school choice funds of up to $325,000 as required by purpose or statute.
Second.
So with that, is there any other discussion on the piece of the motion here? That would fund the $250,000 salary and the $75,000 continuation of the full-day kindergarten reduction. With that, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None? With that, our budget request has been passed.
Thank you. Great, thank you.
And again, I want to do a, you know, not only a direct thank you to you, Kelly, and Steve there, but the entire staff that's worked on putting together not only the budget portion of it, but the contributions that went into the accomplishments of the district throughout the year here, because it's obviously without the staff and the teachers that they're probably one of the most critical elements of our success in that. Team effort. And that's all that we had on our agenda tonight. So with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Nobody wants to stay late? Motion passes.
Every time Daryl shares, it's like an hour and 10 minutes.